Welcome to John Fallon's Indie Film NYC podcast, where we merge the art and business of independent filmmaking. I'm your host, John Fallon. I want to welcome you to today's episode of the Indie Film NYC podcast. Before we get started with my guest today, I wanted to let everybody know that I've been doing a little tinkering with the site, trying to improve things and move things around. And one of the things I did was I moved up my hosting to Podbean, podbean.com. It's a dedicated podcast server. I think should give some nice stability to the site, and the people over there were excellent. They were a lot of help in getting me to transfer all my files over to where they needed to be and get the pages up and really get everything the way it needed to look and feel. You'll still be able to access the podcast through iTunes and through my site, indiefilmnyc.com. And in the next few weeks, I've got a few exciting collaborations that I'm going to announce, and I'm looking forward to growing this audience. But to do that, I really need people to go to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you go for your podcast and subscribe. And if you've got time, to also please leave a review and a rating. It really helps people find the podcast, and it's a big help to me and to spreading the word of the Indie Film NYC podcast. So today's interview, I spoke with Vincent Petrosini and Sonja O'Hara, who created this dramatic episodic television series called Doomsday. I saw the Doomsday trailer on Facebook. The first thing I noticed was the production value. The production quality of it was really high. And for some reason, it reminded me of the show The Leftovers. If you haven't seen The Leftovers, that's some of the best writing I know of on television right now, and just an excellent show, but it's really dark and it's probably not for everybody. And I think Doomsday fits right into that same niche of dark and disturbing, but thoroughly entertaining and fascinating. Doomsday is already starting to get some serious attention from industry people. It was in the IFNYC Television Film Festival, and recently was in the ITVFest up in Dover, Vermont. Now, ITVFest is one of the premier independent television festivals in the United States. And over the weekend, Doomsday got 2 awards, one for Best Actress and another award for Best in Competition. So basically their grand prize, the ITVFest grand prize. So obviously people are responding really well to the show, and it's only a matter of time before we're going to see Doomsday kind of in a wide release, maybe on maybe broadcast somewhere, maybe on an HBO, maybe a Netflix, who knows. All those deals are being worked out kind of as we speak, but certainly the festival attention and the festival wins is going to help them greatly get their vision out there. So we really delve into kind of the relationship that Sonja O'Hara and Vincent Petrosini developed, first with their film Ovum. Sometimes the first project that you work on with somebody is almost like a testing ground. You know, you've got a vision that you are working on together, but how can you further that relationship? And so as you'll hear, I think a lot of this business is about relationships, how you develop those and nurture those relationships so that you can create kind of a longevity to your partnership. Take a listen and see what independent producers, directors, and writers are doing to get their episodic series in front of audiences. I want to welcome you guys today to the Indie Film NYC podcast. Speaking with Vincent Petrosini. Is that right?
Vincent Petrosini, yes, that's right.
Vincent Petrosini and Sonja O'Hara.
Yes. Thank you so much for having us on the show.
I'm so glad to have you. I really found you guys through your latest project, the Doomsday. I saw a trailer for that, and excellent trailer. It's very compelling. It's it draws you right in. I think
Thank you. That's really kind to say that. I appreciate that.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your background before we get into kind of your latest project. Just tell me a little bit. How did you get into the film business? Did you go to film school, or what's your
Sonja?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Nova Scotia, and I was a child actor, and it's kind of been one of those things where it's as soon as I did it at 10 years old, I was like, there's nothing else I ever want to do in my life. And I grew up acting, and I moved to New York at 17 to go to acting school at the New York Conservatory for Dramatic Arts, and moved to LA at 20 and was doing the auditioning thing. And I was getting frustrated that I kept on getting cast in like teen horror movies where I'm running in a bikini from like someone with a chainsaw. And I was like, this isn't why I went to drama school and studied theater. Like, I want to do better roles and better parts. But that's also kind of what happens if you're a girl in your early 20s in LA. Like, you know, that's just, it goes to the territory. So I ended up moving back to New York, and at that point I knew I just wanted to focus on more serious roles, even if it meant not paying my bills entirely with acting, which I had been doing up until that point and was fortunate. And I started writing, and I took a screenwriting class through a teacher at NYU, and on the very first day I was like, I'm here and I'm going to write a feature, and I'm going to produce it, and I'm going to star in it. And he laughed at me and was like, sure, that's very ambitious, but you know, most people don't actually do that. But I did. I wrote a script at that point about being an egg donor, and I funded the feature film by really selling my eggs, and got, you know, like $20,000 for it. And then I ended up meeting Vincent, and I had worked with him on another project as an actor, and he's just one of those smart, competent people on a set that makes things run smoothly. And I was just really impressed, and I tried to lure him into my project, and I invited him to my reading, and I knew he also acted, and I was like, I have a role for you. And I just thought he was wonderful, and I was like, I have to work with this person. And then Vincent came on board, and we decided to shoot the feature, and he was able to get us investor money, and it was kind of a dream come true. And then it did the festival circuit, and we ended up getting distribution, and it was just one of those very cool things where everything comes together. And that was my first kind of introduction to filmmaking, from being behind the camera as well as just being an actor. And that's kind of how Vinny and I met.
And how long were you in LA doing the
I was in LA for 3.5 years, and during that time it was good. I was able to fill my IMDb with credits in horror movies and lots, like, little parts on TV shows, and it was great. I just, you know, it was that thing of wanting more, and I really did get sick of the constant objectification. Mm-hmm. Because you can only play so many kind of like slutty female characters where you start to get frustrated at how a lot of people, especially men in the film industry, see women and reduce women to these kind of archetypes. And I just didn't want to do that anymore. Like, I knew I will act for the rest of my life. I'll be a 99-year-old actress, but I want to play complicated women, and I certainly wasn't getting to do that. So that was when I was like, okay, if I want to change the trajectory of my career, I have to start writing the kind of roles I want to play. And then once I started doing that, other people started casting me in better roles. So it kind of informed how the world saw me.
Interesting.
So yeah.
So what about
my
you, man?
Story is probably the exact opposite of Sonja's. I got into this pretty late in the game, so to speak. I was an investment banker and a financial money manager, but I always had an affinity for movies. And before I entered in that career, you know, I had a very short stint working for George Romero at his production company, and I was there probably literally a week before I was like, oh, my God, this is so overwhelming. I'm like 17. I'm out of here. So I went and I started a career and a family and bought a house and all these things. And it's something that was always in the back of my mind that I wanted to do. I always wanted to make movies or be an actor or something in the entertainment industry. It's where, when I wasn't stressed out from work, it's where I was gravitating my life, entertainment-wise and everything. And one day, my sister-in-law at the time was a producer at MTV, and she was shooting a TV movie, and one of her lead actors in this thing did a no-show. So she's like, oh, my God, what do I do? I need somebody who's a 40 regular right now. So she calls me up. She says, can you drive to Connecticut from, Long Island? You fit the costume. I just need you to say these few lines, and we'll work around you. We'll be fine. And I was like, that's a terrible idea. I've never done this. So she's like, no, please, just give it a shot. You're the only thing I can get my hands on, like, within an hour. It's like, all right. So I went up there, and that was it. I caught the bug.
Yeah.
I did the role, and surprisingly enough, people were pulling me aside from the set saying, you were actually a lot better than we had thought. You had this quality thing going on that we think you really could do this. You should just, you're rough around the edges. Just go get some acting lessons and you'll be fine. So that's what I did, and I immediately started booking work in commercials, short, stints on television shows, off-Broadway, off-Broadway, that kind of thing, until maybe 5 years later, someone said, hey, you have this financial background. We're producing this short Stephen King film, but we have no idea what we're doing on the money side and production side. Can you help us? So I was like, yeah, sure, okay. So I gave it a shot, and that was my first producing role, and it did well. Played the festivals. It wasn't the most amazing thing out there, but it was certainly something to be proud of. And we all, were really very proud of it, and it did well, and it just turned into one producing gig after another. So now I kind of alternate between acting, producing, not both at the same time sometimes both at the same time, but I kind of lean more towards producing now these days.
And
Sonja already told the story of how we met. And
I know, I did. Your story ended up coming into my story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no,
she came to me with this script, and I was like, oh, great, another actress with a script. Yes, darling, of course, I will read your cute little opus.
Yeah.
And I read it, and I was like, oh, my God, this is, like, really, really good. This is one of the best things I've read, like, in months and months. I said, no, I really want to do this. I will act in it. I will produce it. I will get you your coffee. Whatever it is you want me to do on this film, I'm in. So, and that's how we went forward.
That became our script, Ovum. And now we finally, after doing the festival circuit for a year and, like, winning Best Picture at the Big Apple Film Festival and all of that stuff, it just got distribution. So it will finally be coming out to iTunes and Video on Demand and Hulu and all of those things on Mother's Day in 2017. So it's finally happening, because you work on a movie for so long, and outside of, people seeing it on the festival circuit, it's that thing of being like, wow, it needs an audience. How do we get it out there? And then luckily a distributor finally saw it and saw the thing that we hoped they'd see, and now it will finally be coming out. So we're really excited about that, and terrified, but mostly excited.
Well, that actually leads into a question I had, I guess about Doomsday, but just about producing in general. So, it sounds like with Ovum, you guys you had the project, you dove in, and you made the film. After the film was done, you started looking for the distribution aspect.
Right.
So what did you learn from that process that you did things differently with Doomsday? Like, how did you approach it?
A lot. Well, we're much savvier this time around about things like sales agents, and there are just lots of things in the post-production and distribution angle that we hadn't navigated before, like technical things. Like, I didn't know as a first-time film producer about errors and omissions insurance, and that if we were going to need to get distribution and be on iTunes and Amazon Prime and all these things, that there were requirements for feature films. And if you come from a big movie studio, something like that kind of insurance is like a drop in the bucket. But if you're doing a lot of the fundraising yourself, or got investors but didn't anticipate that you'd need to save money for that, those are things that now that we're getting offers for potential distribution for the Doomsday TV series, I can automatically be like, okay, well, does what you're offering us include an insurance policy? Does it include like XXX, so we no longer have to pay for things out of pocket? But before we didn't know that. So each thing, it would be scrambling as an obstacle would come up. And we'd always make it through, because Vincent and I are really like hell-bent on no matter what overcoming those obstacles. But there were a lot of things that if we had anticipated beforehand, they would have been probably smoother transitions. Mm-hmm. So this time, when we're talking to distributors, we're less desperate to get the project out there. We know it will find a home. Like, we have that confidence because the other one did. We know this will. And you don't really have that scarcity mindset of being like, this has to happen now. I'll take any offers. So we have different people talking to us, and we're able to kind of negotiate and know our worth, which can only come from experience. Right, Vinny?
Yes, absolutely. It became a huge learning curve, and the fact that what got us through it was Sonja and I work really, really well together, and the relationships that you form in these production, endeavors are really important because, it's a lot of personality management and severe ingenuity and elbow grease and tolerating these tremendous obstacles that can seem overwhelming, but just handling them one at a time and knowing that you have somebody who's competent and trustworthy who you can fall back on to pick up.
Because they can seem insurmountable. And I read somewhere that idea that a film is never actually finished. It's just abandoned. Because there's infinite things that you can do to, like, tweak. And, like, the people that have, like, sound mix after sound mix and everything, ADR and scoring and, like, every tiny little detail, like, you could get stuck on each one of them forever, and your project could ultimately never get finished. And I know a lot of people who've made projects only to abandon them. And I kind of feel like, especially when we're working on, like, the SAG ultra-low budget agreement with a lot of our stuff, if you can't really compensate your union actors with a real paycheck, you do owe them finished footage. You owe them getting to have that chance on the festival circuit to see an audience. And I get so frustrated when I act in other people's films only because I never know, will it ever be completed, right? And if you're investing that much time and energy into a project, you want the assurance that it'll get out there and people will see your labor of love. So now that we have a track record after working on Ovum, all kinds of actors were like, great, we know that this will get out there, that this will get exposure, and this will get finished. So we suddenly had a giant talent pool of people that were clamoring to work with us. And that was exciting because it makes it where you have, making a film, there's a lot of great things that happen behind the scenes and a lot of talented people. But if the people that aren't on camera, if your main actors aren't compelling, what do you really have, right? And I think, having a good ensemble of people that people can relate to, especially for a TV show where, those characters can come to feel like family if you have the right people and people are watching it for a long time. So, I don't know, I'm really grateful to the actors that we have that are willing to work on a shoestring budget and yet treat it like they're on a hit HBO show.
Right.
Yeah.
And to just add to what you just said, the fact that these people have enveloped these characters so well that even when we're all living together on the set, we often call them by their character names.
We do.
When we're out drinking or relaxing. Or
right, they have blurred. Like our wonderful actress Alice Kremelberg, who plays Sorrel. The amount of times on set where we were like, Sorrel, and she would just respond in character because it had become almost interchangeable.
It's become a great working environment with all of them, and they're really, really lovely people. Apart from being, one of the things on a set that's really important is harmony.
Right.
And even though we very often have different opinions or different ways of doing things, I would be lying if I said Sonja and I never butted heads.
No, of course not.
It's incredibly rare, but we know that we're both working towards the same goal.
Yes.
And all the actors and the people in front of and behind the camera on both our projects so far they're really like family. They really become very close to you personally.
Right, and Vinny touched upon this, but in this shoot, we literally live together because we're shooting in the Catskill Mountains. And we all stay in a house together where we're also simultaneously filming. So it ended up being kind of communal cult-like living when, our project is about a cult. So it wasn't that far from the reality of actually being on set. Though we like to think we're nicer to each other than our characters are. But
how long are the shoots when you go? So you guys have 3 episodes. Did you film them simultaneously, or one at a time? How did that structure go, and how long were you shooting?
We go up each half an hour that you see on screen, we shoot in a week of being on set. So last summer we went up for 2 weeks and shot the first 2 half-hour episodes, and this summer we went up and did 2 more 2-week periods and shot all of the footage that way. And we just kind of all live and work together when we're up there, and then come back to the city and edit and enter festivals in the winter. Because after shooting our first movie, Ovum, when it was like blizzard in January in New York, Vinny and I vowed that winters are for post-production and the summers are for being on set, because it really just
unless you're making a movie about bobsledding, there's no reason to
Yeah, we've really learned that it's just keeping your cast and crew happy and not in pain when you're shooting in snowdrifts is really, really crucial.
And so where did the idea for Doomsday come from? Tell me a little bit about what is it and where it came from.
Okay, well, when I was an actor in LA, my very first summer when I was out there, I responded to a casting call where they were looking for actors for kind of like reenactment videos. So I would be portraying a girl that had gone through some sort of trauma and, can't get a date, and she's like this sad sack sort of girl. And then suddenly I come back and play her after she's learned this remarkable thing, and suddenly she's witty and charming and great on a date and everything is successful. But they didn't show me what was happening in the middle, that like what was the cause of this radical change. So I go to the audition, and then I find out I booked it, and I still don't really know anything else about it until suddenly I realized that we're shooting in the Scientology Center in LA. And I was like, this is interesting. And it turns out that they were Scientology propaganda videos. And I was like a broke actor at the time, and I need the money, and they're paying pretty well. But while I was on set, I found myself really interested in the dynamic of this group, because all the things that you read about Scientologists and all the weird, wacky, crazy, but true stuff, when you're in the middle of something, it doesn't seem so weird. And I just became obsessed with that duality between what it's like on the inside of a secretive sect versus how the world sees it, and how that Stockholm syndrome can kind of take over when you're in something and you don't quite realize how radical or bizarre it is. So I just became obsessed with cults and started reading and watching everything I could. And I watched, the Going Clear Scientology doc, the Alex Gibney one that went to Sundance, and I thought that was amazing. And I watched the one that was at Sundance last year called Holy Hell, about a real cult that was around for 17 years before they imploded. And I just became obsessed and just wrote and wrote and wrote and threw out a lot of drafts. And then we decided we were just going to go for it. And we went up to that house and shot it. So, it's about, young idealists that get carried away with their idea, and their little green oasis kind of everything goes wrong, It's a bunch of good people that become obsessed, and things get dirty and fucked up. And, that's kind of the premise of Doomsday, and it's very much an ensemble piece, so there are a lot of really amazing actors doing insanely wonderful performances.
Great.
Vinny, do you have anything to say about that?
It's really a character development piece. You could literally make an entire show or several episodes around each one of these individual people. They're so richly written, so richly performed.
They're really great.
You want to know about what brought them here, and we do get into that. What was their life like before? What was their life during the cult? What did they have a life after?
Right. So we're going to be using a lot of flashbacks too.
Yeah, it's a very full character arc for each and every one of these people. Some briefer than others, some much, much longer than others. But everybody's getting to tell a complete story of an individual. and
it's a
why they
doomsday
function
cult.
that way.
So you know that they're all coming together only to ultimately end their lives. Mm-hmm. And it starts to hint at the end of our second episode about the idea that some of them may have tried to kill themselves in the past. So it's that idea of seeking meaning for your life and the idea for them of potentially ending their life together while really having a movement and getting their voices out there, I think is kind of a compelling reason why a lot of these particular people were drawn to, a doomsday cult. So I'm really interested in kind of exploring what causes people to enter kind of a dark world like that, because it's really not for everyone. Like most people, when they see Scientologists, they're like, how did they get involved with this? It just seems so bad from the outside, but they don't realize that maybe the sense of community when you're in it, maybe it's like having a giant, wonderful family. I don't know, but I think it's interesting in explaining what causes someone to stay.
Sure. Now, was this always envisioned as a series, or did you ever think that it was going to be a feature, and why did you go with series?
I think I always imagined it as a series, just like Ovum was always going to be a movie and never a short film or a series. This, I just saw it in episodic ways. Like I just imagined a first season the way other people might have imagined, like 3 acts in a screenplay. Like I always just imagined like a True Detective style, maybe 8-part miniseries. Like I could see that for season 1, like 8-hour-long episodes.
And do you have that? Like, is that all written out already?
It's all plotted out. I have 4 episodes written in totality, but I also have a show Bible for the rest of the season. And now that we're going to, New York Television Festival at the end of the month, they've given us an opportunity to pitch Doomsday to some of the major networks, and they all want a show Bible, and they all want to know, very much like an arc for each character and the season arc and where it could go and if it could come back for a second season if it were successful. So it's amazing how much planning you have to do as a TV writer. It's incredibly specific and thorough. It's, you really have to imagine that you're going to have a show that's on the air for 7 seasons. It's fascinating.
I think one of the shortfallings of filmmakers nowadays is they're so excited and so hell-bent on producing something that they say, oh, well, we have this great idea and we're going to shoot it as a short, but it could be a feature, or, hey, maybe we could dump it as a web series, or maybe it'll end up on TV. Let's just do it. I think that you really need to identify the product and the audience and to have a fixed goal in mind. Like Sonja said, when we were shooting Ovum was always going to be a feature. We've had people say to us, well, cut it up and make it a web series. No.
Yeah, that was literally told to us by somebody with a successful web series that actually picked up for TV. But I think we were smart not to just jump at any opportunity because it wasn't structurally written in a way that would have sustained a TV audience. Like sometimes people will just do anything that's thrown at them, and opportunities are few and far between. So I get that need to just take anything that comes along. But I think like TV structure, we wouldn't have been doing ourselves any favors if we took a movie that was written that way and broke it up into small pieces. But this was written very much knowing that we wanted to be teasing out the story over the course of a season. So I think it's a different type of storytelling,
Well, the product suffers if you are shooting something that's going to be a long-term TV series and end up cutting it into a feature. Your end product is going to be lacking or missing in certain areas. Maybe you're not going to deliver the points that you were trying to make because when you were writing it, it was originally meant to be something else. I think you really need to focus and be specific about what it is you're doing and follow through with that, even though there may be temptations to drag you left or right along the way. I think it's doing your product a disservice.
And in the past, it used to be that movie people thought, cinema was clearly the superior medium to television, and that's been disproven, obviously, in the last few years. Like, everyone knows that right now this is kind of the golden age of TV. Like, all of these incredible shows like the Breaking Bads and the Mad Men's and so many, we're in a world where some of the best, most compelling stories are on television, and people with, Netflix and Amazon Prime and HBO and Showtime, there's so much good stuff to watch that if you're going to compete at that, or like in that area, you need to really know why you're making your project a TV thing and how you can kind of make plot developments that enable binge watching, because now that's where we are. Like, if you don't have something that people feel the immediate need to watch a next episode, then you're going to get lost, and people are going to, binge the shows like Stranger Things that reward that sort of like, watching like 5 episodes at once. But that makes it harder, too, for TV producers who are doing it independently, like Vincent and I, because now for networks and places like Amazon Prime to be interested in what you're doing, they need you to have multiple episodes. It's no longer where like one TV pilot can be your entire tool to sell a show. Now they're expecting content creators to have like 3 episodes of something before they're willing to invest in it. And that's obviously more of a financial, responsibility.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that specifically because I had not heard that before. I mean, all the information I had was, make a pilot, you pitch the series on the pilot, and you give them your show Bible and all that stuff. So,
I think there's truth to that too, because we met people like when we did Series Fest this year out in Denver, and they had a bunch of amazing panelists, and the people from Stars were there, and a lot of the networks were talking about how now if you want to sell an idea to a network, you make your pilot, but you think of it more of as a proof of concept. So if they were to buy your idea, they wouldn't be going and like taking that pilot and putting it on one of their existing platforms. Like they would be taking it and, probably recasting it and hiring a writer's room, and that what they're seeing is just like a spec for a potential series that they would go and actually make themselves, right? But if you wanted to do it yourself like the way we are, then it's that they need to see that there's an interest and that people are willing to binge watch your thing. And there was a show that got put on Netflix this year. I'm trying to think of the name of it right now. It's eluding me. But they bought 3 episodes. And it was the idea that people won't even invest in watching something now online if it's only 1 episode, because they're like, oh, well, it might not get picked up. Why am I even going to invest in something that we don't know if it's ever going to be finished, when there were so many shows that are, new Netflix original series that they just put the whole 8 episodes online, right? Like, why would someone take a risk in something that may never get finished?
Yeah, no, I mean, I fall to that myself all the time. There's only shows I can watch, and people tell me all the time, well, you got to watch this great show, and it sounds great. I just literally don't have the time to watch all those things.
Right, like my Netflix queue is just too big, and when I'm hearing about all these great things, I want to watch it all. But that's where we all are now at a point where there's so many good things that we're our own curators, and we're picking the things that speak to us. And because there's such a huge glut of content creators making things, it's great that there is something for everyone, but how do you get that audience? Right? Like, how do you throw your piece of art out there, even if it's really fantastic? And, you can't rely on word of mouth until you're on a streaming platform like Netflix. So that's where I guess,
and
getting
whatever
a publicist
whatever content provider you have, it makes their life easier too, because let's say they're confident in a show and they know it's going to be a hit. They don't want to just put all kinds of weight behind it for 3 episodes and then have to wait for you, for 6 or 8 months to come up with the next 3. All that buzz will be gone, and it falls off the cliff. So they want to know that there's a steady stream of content in the pipeline, so that they can put it out or leak it out, and they could plan and build a strategy around it. If you're going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, if you can't come up with the material for them in time, why should they bother building a whole marketing campaign around you if they're not confident that you're going to deliver the goods?
Things
so
just
they
move
want to see.
so quickly.
They want to see things should move very quickly and consistently. And they want to know that you're going to be able to give them an episode a week for the next, X number of weeks, because that's what they're negotiating for, because that's what they're planning for. Because they're going to put a lot of time, money, and effort into a marketing budget, and then you're not going to deliver the material, and, they're going to be very, very unhappy.
So as you go into kind of these pitch meetings you mentioned, how are you positioning yourself? Is it your plan to produce the other episodes yourself, or you would partner with them, or like ideally, what would you like to do?
I mean, in the ideal world, I know that if we were to do something like sell a show to HBO, that we would not realistically be very involved with the creative process, right? Like that's probably selling an idea, a seed of something, and it's not likely that you're going to be able to maintain any creative control. So even though in the dream world we would be doing Doomsday on HBO and getting to maintain creative control on it, that's not usually the reality. So we see ourselves on a platform like Amazon Prime where we can be getting funding to continue doing what we're doing and not having to do it all out of pocket, because that's obviously not a sustainable model. But like I could see us more on like a Netflix, on an Amazon Prime. Even there's a network called, I believe, WGN that did Manhattan, and they do kind of shows that are a little under the radar, but they have an incredible they get incredible material, and they have devoted viewers that kind of come to that network to watch something a little outside the box. So it's going to be more it would be more like we could see ourselves working more independently, where we like collaborate with some sort of existing production resource as opposed to selling it to a network.
Another option is, we've heard and have had discussions with distributors who would fund your future episodes based on the anticipated income that they would generate. So they would basically give you like a loan against future revenue to finish the episodes. There are things like that, but those really are very specific to each platform and each production company. But there is something like that out there.
Oh, that's interesting. So tell me a little bit about, like, with these episodes, did you guys, I think a lot of our listeners are interested in how to fund a project, right? So a lot of people are obviously doing crowdfunding, but then there's obviously like traditional independent investors. How did you guys go about basically backing? Like, you don't have to talk numbers or anything, but what was
crowdfunding? Crowdfunding is such an interesting beast, because I think some people do it in an incredibly effective way. They have huge followings, and it makes sense for them. I think it's great when it works for someone else, but it didn't necessarily fit my model. I very much use social media as a business tool. My own Facebook is filled with casting directors and directors and like filmmakers, and it's very, very business related. And I knew that I worked over many years to have this list of people that are kind of mentors and peers that are doing great things, and that for me personally, if I barraged my Facebook list with constant crowdfunding vehicles, it just would be a bit much, especially once you've had any success and have won any awards. Then people just imagine that you're independently wealthy and that the investors are just lining up, which I totally wish was the case, but it isn't. So we tried to do an Indiegogo campaign for Ovum, and I just realized that my heart wasn't in it. Like, I don't love writing to my other artist friends and begging them for money for my projects. So, I mean, I went with the very untraditional route of literally selling my eggs and making those initial starter funds, which I know is like a very crazy, very specific thing and not like a model that other people could follow. But what we did do is we shot the movie trailer on a micro budget, like just a couple $1,000s. We shot it over the course of 3 days, shooting 5 pages a day. And when we were done with that, we put that trailer on social media, and then somebody that I had gone to high school with, who wasn't like a close friend or anything, but just somebody who'd been a couple years older than me, was now in finance and living in Toronto, Canada, and he saw the trailer and was like, this is great, this needs to be made, and wrote to me out of the blue and said, how much money would it cost for me to become an executive producer on this project? And he gave us the kind of starter funds that we needed to get it off the ground. And then combined with the egg money and the investment we got from Jeff Forbes, the Canadian investor, we had enough to do principal photography. And then when we were in post-production, Vincent was able to approach independent investors and say, look, we know you normally don't put money into a first-time filmmaker, but we have shot the entire film. So this isn't going to be something where we take your money and aren't able to finish. We've shot the entire movie, and then we were able to get the money at that point for sound mixing and publicity and just all our post-production work.
And that was all for Ovum, correct?
And that was all for Ovum, and that was how we got those investors. And then this time around for Doomsday, we knew that we were going to be shooting it again on a micro budget, but instead of having about 40 locations all over New York City, which is what we had for Ovum, this time I had written something that was very much like, okay, we need a house and we need the woods, and nature is going to kind of be an additional character in this project. And that was when we went and I was able to draw up a basic budget, and I went into business again with Vincent and our other two creators from Ovum, Karin Agstam, who stars in all my projects, and Jaspal, who stars in it and also is one of the producers. And the four of us decided that we were going to chip in a quarter of the budget each, so we could maintain creative control, knowing that we could shoot it on a small budget. And it's been pretty amazing because we haven't gone over budget at all. And now, because we did it all on our own, we actually had an investor from Ovum, a different investor than I said, came forward and has offered to potentially match our funds, which is wonderful. And now we're like, okay, so do we entertain having a new person come on board? And the reality is we probably will do that because, you know, it costs to make art, and it never stops costing. You know, that's just how it goes.
Yeah, it always goes back to money. How do you raise it? How do you get it? And probably even more important than that, how do you spend it?
Right.
You know, it's you really are counting every penny, and you have to be so creative and so use so much ingenuity to get these things done. I mean, during Ovum, I was providing wildly healthy and scrumptious breakfasts for I think like $1 a person.
Yeah, that was amazing. I still don't know how you did that.
Well, the word prostitution probably will in some way, but no, you call in favors, and the thing with calling in favors is you have to repay them. You know, everybody says, well, I'm doing these projects with my friends, and you know, we're all going to help each other out because when we're successful, we're going to be there for each other. You actually really have to do it. If you owe somebody a favor, you have to repay it. Because my very first couple of shorts and features that I've done, you know, many moons ago, you know, the director says, well, I'm going to get everybody on board, and we're going to, you know, I'll just promise them all gigs on my next movie. And if those gigs never come, those people get very upset. So you really have to be true to your word, and you have to deliver. It's delivery.
And now that I have this team that I work with on everything, the people that do good work are people that we hire again and again and again. Like our sound person, Eric Romery, and our cinematographer, Dan McBride, and our gaffer, Justin Holt, are three people that I want to work with on every project for the rest of my life. Because when you find great people like that, it's like that's where like a loyalty happens, where thank God they still want to work with us and we make sure to treat them well. But finding talented, kind, good people to collaborate with, like that's why I think our work has been good both times. It's because we surround ourselves with people that are really masters at each one of their trades, and we don't have one of those sets where it's like, okay, well, I'm the writer and producer, so I'm also going to be lighting it and doing all these things. No, like we make sure to leave professionals to be doing the things that alter, picture quality. Like, we're not, even though we wear many hats, we never do anything that we're not, like, trained to do artistically. Like, we have people that are wonderful that are, doing color correction and are scoring the project.
Where we're jockeying for position or trying to assert our will over. I mean, when I'm on set and I'm behind camera and I'm handling the day-to-day stuff, I have opinions, I have suggestions of things, but you really, really have to rely on the expertise of the person that you hired. I've also worked with people who I'm the writer, I'm the producer, the director, the star, the editor, and I'm the fundraiser. And they have this one idea where their will is law on the set when you're really depending on so many other people. Mm-hmm. And you have to trust that those people will do their jobs. And we have been very fortunate to have such an amazing crew of people who are really, they're very personable. It's like we hang out with them after, we're done. We go to, bars or clubs or movies or whatever it is that we do for entertainment afterwards, and we still enjoy their company. It's not where we're all running off a set going, oh, God, thank God that's over. I couldn't deal with that person not 5 more minutes. There's not one person that we don't get along with, and that's important.
Yeah, and that's fortunate. But it wasn't without bumps in the road, and I would never name names, but there are times, when you're making a project that you'll have people that just don't mesh well, and they might be creatively brilliant, but if they're not able to compromise or if you don't find, workable solutions and respect each other at the end of the day, it just, it doesn't work. There can be lots of great people, but some personalities clash. So I'm really proud of the little production company we've put together because each one of those people I would trust with my life on top of, just being able to make beautiful art together. So finding good people, I think that's half of what makes a project successful.
I hear that story over and over again when I talk to other independent filmmakers. I mean, relationships are
everything.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And don't burn bridges. That's another thing. I've tried to hire my crew out on other people's projects, and it hasn't worked. And I'm very, very protective over the people that I work with because I know how valuable they are and how incredible. And when I don't see people treating them well, that reflects poorly on me and everyone around me. So it is. It's, when you find great people, fight to keep them in your inner circle because, they're no one's replaceable like that.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's some great advice for other independent filmmakers who are trying to make their way, maybe on their first feature or something,
thank you.
Cultivating those, both, and on the financial side too. I mean, I think, you have, like you mentioned, Vincent, there are people you can approach because you have that relationship with them. And
right.
It's probably easier.
And we've included them in every step of the way because I feel like a lot of times investors might put in money, but they feel like you just think of them as the money person. And that can be really tempting as an indie filmmaker to just be like, oh, well, I'm the true artiste and they're just the money person. But at the end of the day, people don't go into indie film, independent producing to make money, right? They're not being investment bankers. They're almost patron of the arts if they're putting money in. And I think respecting them as people and trying to ask their opinions on some things and trying to make them happy so they're also proud of the work that their name is on makes people be more willing to come back to work with you again.
All right. Well, so tell me where I can see Doomsday.
At the end of the month, we're going to be at New York Television Festival, which I'm so excited about because we were only one of 63 pilots programmed out of 3,500 submissions for that festival, and they're sponsored by HBO and Gersh and AMC and ICM, all the big guys. So we're playing at the same festival that's doing a big farewell to girls with Lena Dunham speaking at the festival. So we're kind of like a little fish at a big sea at that one. So we're really proud about that.
That's in Manhattan?
Yeah, that's in Manhattan. It's in Chelsea on the 29th of October at 1 p.m. We're playing at the Helen Mills Theater. Yes. And all of that information is on New York Television Festival's website.
I'll put some links in the show notes for
That'd
sure.
be wonderful. And tickets for that are only $5. Because they're kind of like the big guys, they're able to keep all of their prices down really, really low because they have huge sponsorship, and they're really just trying to get great independent pilots in front of an audience. So they're really wonderful. That festival, I'd recommend every filmmaker who can get their pilot, done in time to submit for them, because they're literally setting up meetings for us with networks, and it's an amazing, amazing festival. It really is the Sundance of TV festivals.
And then how can people find you guys if they want to reach out and connect?
My website is www.sonja.o'hara.com. And you can also find me on IMDb. And, I'm constantly updating my website with the projects, and I'll have Ovum's release date on there as well.
And when is the Ovum release date?
Ovum will be on iTunes on Mother's Day 2017. So they're going to be putting trailers everywhere, and you'll also be able to rent it on demand on your TV. So that will be very cool.
My website's currently under construction. I only just finally acquiesced.
Yeah, you got a website. I'm happy.
Yes. Lori Mizell is my social media expert, and she's setting me up with all the fancy things that an actor-producer should have. And but in general, you can reach me on IMDb. All my contact information is there.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we hope to be seeing great things from you guys, as well as seeing Doomsday take off.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure to be on your show. You asked such insightful questions. It's really nice to get to talk to somebody who is really clearly passionate about independent film.
Absolutely. And my main goal is to teach people, the ins and outs through your experiences and how they can, make a living and have a sustained.
Yeah, as the artist.
Yeah.
That's what we all want to do, right? Is be able to make our art.
Right. To get our art out there for giant audiences and continue doing what we love.
I want to thank you for joining me today on this episode of John Fallon's Indie Film NYC podcast. If you're making or thinking about making an episodic series yourself, then I hope that some of the advice and experience that Sonja and Vincent talked about during this episode will really help you. If you want to learn more about Doomsday, check out the trailer, or get links to any of the other information we talked about during the podcast, please visit the show page at indiefilmnyc.com/IFNYC014. And again, if you enjoyed this podcast, please consider subscribing and leave us a comment and a rating. It really helps spread the word about the podcast, and I promise to read and respond to each comment personally. So until next time, thanks for joining us.